勝負の世界でしか生きられない人々がいる。これは麻雀界において雀聖と呼ばれた伝説のギャンブラーの物語である。
Legendary Gambler Tetsuya doesn't have much going for it at first glance. The art is abrasive, the subject matter is incredibly niche, and to a Western observer, it's not from an established author such as Nobuyuki Fukumoto, FKMT to his fans, and it certainly isn't backed up by an expansive library of manga or shows on Crunchyroll. However, what Tetsuya has is charm. The show focuses on the life of Tetsuya Asada as a young mahjong gambler in post-war Japan, betting his survival on nothing but his own luck. Now this may already sound like something quite familiar to anyone who has more than cursory interest in mahjong, and that'd be correct. It sounds a lot like Akagi. Both shows take place in post-war Japan, both feature ugly or unique art styles, and both are focused upon mahjong. Tetsuya already sounds like it's borrowed quite a lot from Akagi, but I'm willing to say, as someone who has seen and enjoyed both shows, that the two are quite different and quite enjoyable together as companion pieces to each other or as separate entities. So, why bother with this show if you have or haven't seen Akagi? Well, if you haven't seen Akagi, then I'm going to assume that you don't have much of an understanding of mahjong, but that's perfectly fine. Neither do I, and I've been enjoying this genre for several years now. Thankfully, Tetsuya doesn't hinge upon having a decent understanding of mahjong either, but the only available release of the show doesn't have notes from a translator detailing how many points a hand is worth or who exactly is winning, so you're going to have to pick up the pace yourself, which is why I can't recommend this show in good faith to anyone who hasn't a small understanding of mahjong, or at least watched something of mahjong in it, and knows that they enjoy watching them play the game, regardless of their knowledge of who is winning or not. But, regardless of your knowledge or appreciation of mahjong, the series also has the makings of a good period drama. The characters each have their own drives and desires, and their aspirations are relevant to the genre and the setting. My favourite character arc is that of Danshi's, a delinquent type of gambler who Tetsuya begrudgingly takes under his wing, but I won't spoil that as it's quite enjoyable. Now, if you have seen Akagi, or are at least familiar with mahjong, the series should be quite easy to follow. There are no tricks or gimmicks like see-through tiles or using drained blood as a sort of point or life system like Yu-Gi-Oh, but there are a couple of gimmicks and there's a lot of cheating. In fact, there is a lot of cheating, but all the cheating is explained quite thoroughly and is treated very professionally. Mahjong, in fact, is played quite differently in Tetsuya, but is still mahjong, but with a heavy emphasis on making your own luck, using different physical and psychological techniques. Trickery and cheating is treated as part of the game here, and it's very rare for a game to be played without some form of deceit. I find this to be a welcome change, as I am tired of characters being immeasurable geniuses or using sheer force of will and some perhaps supernatural abilities to force the way of the game. Instead, mahjong is played in a world where everything is on the line here, and people are naturally pushed to their limits. The series even has a running gag where characters will occasionally abandon games by going to the toilet and then calmly climbing out the window. Post-war Japan is a setting that we don't always get to see in anime and manga, and it's easy to understand why. And without it, it is easy for one to imagine Japan as some sort of fantasy land from swords and samurai to a bureaucratic/anarchic Neo-Tokyo or Blade Runner-inspired metropolis. And that is why I'm always quite excited to read about Japan or watch Japan in the post-war setting, as it's quite different from what we know, and it's far more entertaining, I find, than repetitive cyberpunk, futuristic, or perhaps even modern-day settings. In fact, the past is always a lot more interesting, but in some ways I find that anime or manga go back too far to, the Sengoku period or to the Meiji Restoration, and whilst those settings are enjoyable, there's a lot of them and the area is quite saturated. Whereas Showa Japan also does not show Japan in a favourable light. Post-war Japan is gritty, it's dark, it's suffering the effects of 2 atom bombs and losing a war, its industry has been destroyed, and it is facing both political upheaval and also social turmoil as Western values are imposed upon the strict Japanese and the youngsters are forced to survive in a world that has gone from having almost everything to barely anything. Now this is where of course our main character Tetsuya and the game of Mahjong come in, as Mahjong is the primary vehicle in which Tetsuya earns a living and sustains himself. Now Tetsuya himself provides a stark contrast to the gritty post-war atmosphere that surrounds him. He of course has his own troubles and difficult experiences with post-war shortages and in fact some wartime period struggles that are elaborated upon in the manga and the show, but mainly during the show he is presented as being rather well kept, well fed and quite clean. As Tetsuya naturally stands out, this also gives him a sort of natural confidence when he's on his back foot, especially in the more difficult Mahjong games that he has to face. Now the manga provides a better look into post-war Japan. There are some grittier scenes, especially those involving US servicemen who played a rather interesting role in post-war Japan that I wish was elaborated further upon in the anime, and this video is primarily about the anime because the entirety of the manga is not translated. In fact, barely any of the manga is translated, and I hope that this video will inspire someone to at least translate the manga or to read it if you are fluent in Japanese. So that brings us back to my original question. Why watch legendary Gambler Tetsuya? Well, as I have already elaborated upon during the course of this video, it is a period drama that uses Mahjong primarily as a vehicle for plot advancement and also character development. And if you enjoy any of those things, or even if you don't, I would still recommend watching the video. As I've said before, there are various factors that make this show quite enjoyable and quite engaging, and I find that it is also in some ways divorced from those within the same genre, such as Akagi, as this show came about 5 years before Akagi was released and thus does not fall into the same tropes that you may find in modern gambling anime or manga, even though I have barely read any of those as they are not readily available to us sadly. I'd like to thank you all for watching and listening to my video. It took me far long to make this, and as you can tell my delivery is disjointed because I've recorded countless different samples and searched vainly to find one that was to my liking. Please leave comments about what was wrong, what I could improve on, and what you enjoyed. And also please request that FKMT Crazy continue translating the manga, as I wish to read far more of it than is readily available in English. So, goodbye and thank you all. This has been my first video for the series Anime Obscura, but please feel free to recommend your own shows for my viewing or other general obscure shows, as there are countless animes out there that just don't get the appreciation I believe they deserve. And so with that, I would like to say thank you and goodbye.